Okay, great. Again, thank you all for joining us. Lots of competition on the roster, so appreciate seeing all of these smiling faces in the room. We have the privilege of being introduced by Edie Frazier, so I'm going to ask for her to come up and set the tone for our session.
Thank you, Oscar. Does everybody feel energized? You know, did you stop and just think about what Maikanda just said, of what it really means in terms of the equity of every child? All right, so let's just share why Citizen Schools exist, why we at STEM Connector really exist, our Million Women Mentors exist, and is why we so care about that equity of every child, and why we believe there's a great pathway to a great job, right, which is just so important and is critical. Part of this is wake up America and wake up the ultra-right America, because we realize now that this country with kids under 7 years old is already a minority country, right? And soon kids 18 and under are going to be the minorities, are the majority. And by, we used to say 2045, now we're saying probably 2035, the country, the minorities are the majority. So we cannot not know it's the marketplace, it's the workforce, it's our educational system, and it's our jobs. So let's just say that framework and why so important that Citizen Schools, and Oscar, your role of what you're doing to do our communities is so important. I want to just acknowledge my colleague, Julie Cantor, who's our Chief Partnership Officer at STEM Connector and Million Women Mentors. Julie, thank you for all you do. And as we think about Dan and what you have been doing as a mentor, and now Dan shares he's going to be an entrepreneur, and as Blair, and then we talk about OSTP and the White House, and each of you is basically, Neil, what you've been representing out there, and truly with your own school district and Harvard, how we've got different constituencies that we all bring together. Let us just share a little bit why we built STEM Connector. We built it because we were told that the country was expending $1 trillion on STEM education, but nobody knew who was doing what or results that we had. We now project we're spending at least $1.2 trillion if you put all the constituencies together. And so we tried to organize an ecosystem, and that was no easy feat because we had no idea how big it was, or that we could work with 6,600 entities, right, and really break down that. But it goes back to the communities and the importance of clearly what Citizen Schools represents. But we took the demand side, which we call STEM 2.0 rather than 1.0, of everything in the system, and said we've got to understand where the jobs are, because we see 5.1 million jobs that need to be filled in the next 10 years, right? So that is, and if we look at it, 80% of jobs require STEM skills. 75% require the IT skills. And for women and girls, as Julie says better than mine, it's the pay equity issue. Because we say that STEM jobs are 92 cents on a dollar, all right, as opposed to 77 cents, or as Julie and I share, Hispanic and Black girls is, and it's the same thing for Marty kids, are down to 57 cents on a dollar. So if we can get them up with the right skills, and all of it takes that encouragement. So as we've been listening downstairs, I think Citizen Schools got this theme of think big. And we've got to think the macro level of how we're all thinking big and taking these ideas and galvanizing a movement. And then what do we do to recognize all those down at the community level and the individual schools and the mentors and the mentees that are touching the kids and the parents and the teachers to really drive change and hopefully make it a very competitive country, correct? Julie reminded me that I've got to mention that we put out something every day called STEM Daily. How many of you get it? Oscar gets it. All of you get it. Oh, this is great. All right. Well, go up and get it, because we put out stemdaily.org and EdTech Weekly If you go up, it's all free. And what it just gives you by 24 categories, all the great news that's happening around STEM. And it really is very comprehensive. And it's all about innovation as well. And it covers schools, and it covers grants, and it covers an awful lot of things. But when we think about where we're really going is what we know is on our innovation task force, we came up with not only STEM 2.0, but we came up with the idea of Career Accelerator Day. And that is really important to you because I think we challenge everybody in the panel and everybody in the audience. What we're now doing, we tested it in 5 sites last year. We've got it in probably 30 sites already this year. It's to get kids out of the classroom like you're doing, but into the workforce for a day, into the R&D labs, into the IT facilities, and really it just becomes, so if you're interested, and we've got a lot of corporations that are taking this up, we say it's a movement like Take Our Daughters to Work today. So it's just let us know about that. Just mentioned also, does anybody know the data from My College Options? All right, so Julie, you do, yay. All right, but we've got data through them on 15 million kids and their career interests. And the first time you can now access it by zip code. 15 million kids, it's like 80%, 60,000 teachers they review the career interest of each kid with the kids. And that is now online, which is really incredible when you've got schools out there and in your communities to go. So ask us about that resource. It's all free online. But it can be tremendously helpful when you want to look at what these kids, and this is not the middle school, it's 9th through 12th grade, right? But it's still amazing to think about that career pathway of how many kids want IT jobs versus what they want to do in healthcare, et cetera, right? So let me just give one mention of why we think the US 2020 is so important in our partnership, right, Julie? Because we took Million Women Mentors, and we, like US 2020, set a goal of 1 million girls all the way up from middle school through careers. And we're up to 254,000 pledges, 254,000 pledges in 14 months. But you have to give 20 hours of mentoring. And as Julie points out all the time, our studies have showed that only 4% of girls feel like they're getting mentors, right? That's why our numbers have gone so down in STEM jobs. So realize between us at US 2020 and what we've got with Million Women Mentors, so we've organized 31 states. We're about ready to announce probably in the next 3 months, 40 cities that will go, and all of this with the support of what we can do together to really change that pathway. And we've got 5 pathways, but this is not about STEM Connector or Million Women Mentors, and we can give you a lot. We've really looked at where you can go for IT jobs in the communities. You know, we still have, as the White House knows because they've worked with us, 30 states that don't recognize the teaching of computer science, right? So we know we've just got to keep pushing the public policy, right, Stephanie, as we work together. That is just so important. So I want to just mention one other thing that we just shared with the incredible Blair Christie from Cisco. You know, when we think big and we say it's partnerships and collaboration, it's what you're doing in your communities. But what we organized was a higher education council, lots of community college, historically black colleges, and all of that. And we did 62 case studies between business and higher education of where they're partnering on real jobs, to real training, to get those skills into the marketplace. So Julie and I brought some copies. Certainly Citizen Schools got other copies that you can come out. But
Steve wrote.
Right?
Steve
And
was one of the
Steve
authors.
so clearly Citizen Schools is in here in a major way, and the diversity story is in a major way. But Oscar, I think we just want to salute you and the panel and to say it is our communities that are going to be making the difference. So together is if we each get into this ball game, and how exciting, Dan, to bring Blair brings this incredible corporate perspective. If we get the White House, and clearly when we see what we've got in a school system like Hartford, you've got an intriguing panel, and the session is terrific. So Julie and I just want to say it's one go team. That's really our mantra, is really a go team, because none of us do it alone. And the only way we're going to do it is really together. So Julie and I just thank you. We're so thrilled to have this partnership. So Oscar, it's yours.
Edie, thank you so much for that framing. And yes, it is in partnership and through collaboration, and that is the cornerstone, the center of what our panel is going to be about this afternoon. So thank you so much for that introduction, and the comment on the partnership between William and Mentor, STEM Connector, as well as US 2020. All this work is happening in collaboration with each other and for the advancement, academic achievement for youth in science, technology, engineering, and math, particularly those who are underrepresented in the field, girls, students of color, and students from low-income communities. So I want to welcome the panel, and so I'm just going to say their name and their title, and we'll get into who they are through our questions. And you can also read about their extensive backgrounds in the program materials that you guys got when you registered. So first, immediately to my left, we have Dan Brudnicki, who is a higher achievement mentor and on the President Council member. Next to him is Blair Christie, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for Cisco. Followed by her is Stephanie Santoso, who is the Senior Policy Advisor for Making with the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. And then Neil Weathers, who is the Supervisor of Mathematics and Science for the Meriden Public School District. Thank you guys for being here. Really excited. We've had a lot of great, fun conversations leading up to this one, so I'm ready to get right into it. I'd love to go down the line of the panelists with this opening question. And you think about answering it personally and or professionally, but how are you involved in STEM learning, particularly through that framework of expanded learning time and through partnership?
So I've been a mentor with Higher Achievement for 5 years now, and I teach math. I have a group of sixth graders who are absolutely wonderful, almost all the time. Almost. What I find in my experience so far, I'm not trained in education, and so I'm kind of a layperson coming in. I'm a technology kind of a guy coming into an educational environment. And what I've found is that the schools do a very good job in what I've seen in terms of teaching the basics in math. But so as a mentor, what I look at is how do I augment that? How do I help my scholars see the opportunities for applying that learning? It's all about applying that learning. So in my background, I spent 25 years in aviation working with the FAA and consulting. And I will take an aviation scenario. I'll take an aeronautical map and put it in front of my scholars and have them draw out the shortest route to get from point A to point B. And I'll explain that this is what flight operations people do in the airlines. And then we'll go into things about how much fuel can I save if I go a different route and so forth. And so you turn practical problems into things that are more interesting than just going through the curriculum. And so that application, I think, is really important. They get some fun out of it. And there's another subtle little point that they get, in that they could be directors of flight operations, so they can own an airline at some point if they want to, or they can do. So our job as mentors is to introduce them to the application of the learning that they're getting in school and what we're trying to supplement.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm involved with STEM and mentoring both on a professional and personal way. From a professional perspective, it feels like this space intersects everything Cisco does. So we sell to the public sector, and education is an incredibly important industry. And so selling technology and solutions is one thing, but when our team gets involved with the classrooms or the districts, they get so engaged, and so we keep trying to do more and more. So we've worked very closely with our public sector team, and I'm very engaged with them as the marketing leader to make sure that we can add the most value, and it's incredibly rewarding. We also have a community relations organization because we have to have very thriving communities in which we operate globally. Obviously, we're much larger in the U.S. than just about anywhere else. So we're really engaged at a local level around the country because this is where our employees' students go to school. This is the talent and the workforce of the future. So we're doing a number of things. Edie's organization and STEM Connector, we're very involved with US 2020 and others to try to really address the STEM opportunity we have as well as the gaps within the community. And then, the vision of Cisco is pretty, I think, audacious. And as the CMO, I often wonder who came up with it 25 years ago, because I didn't pay them, but I want to thank them. And our vision is that we want to change the way the world works, lives, plays, and learns. And everything about this space speaks of that, and it's a big piece of our culture. And then finally, personally, I have 3 kids, 2 girls, 9 and 12, who are huge Lego fans, huge design fans, and we were just talking about how much they love math and science. But yet I'm noticing my 12-year-old not wanting to take science electives for the sole reason that it's all boys and her. And we're trying to figure it out. And we were just talking, we're brainstorming. Why is this a problem? I keep telling them, get a Survey Monkey, get on your Instagram and Ask FM or whatever it is you're using, and let's try to figure this out, because I'm seeing the moment in time that I'm going to lose my big-brained 12-year-old to something that I know she adores. So there's a whole bunch of intersections here that brings it together. So through financial resources, partnership with a company, and just my own personal passion, I think it's a place that's very worthy of time spent.
So I think so. Okay, great. So I have been at the White House for a little over a year as the advisor for Making, and one of the big initiatives that the White House has been really interested in expanding is thinking about the ways that we can create more high-quality opportunities for hands-on STEM learning both in and outside of the classroom that relates to making, tinkering, building. I think I myself identify myself as a maker. I was a maker before I came to the White House, and making and creating, I think in a world where we are very much a digital society, creating an opportunity for us to be able to meld the digital and the physical, and to be able to create something that is that we're proud of, that we're personally interested in, can be really empowering for a child and for a student and for an adult, for that matter. And so we're really interested in the way that these hands-on opportunities can continue to inspire kids to pursue their own personal interest in science, technology, and STEM fields, but also arts and design. So one of the really interesting things about Making is that it's inherently very interdisciplinary, right? So whether a kid is interested in fashion design, they might be wanting to create their own patterns. That requires a knowledge of geometry and mathematics, but also maybe design thinking skills, to robotics, to 3D modeling or 3D printing. These are all things that are very interdisciplinary skill sets that are required, right? So I think there's a real inherent benefit to thinking about the ways that Making can continue to not just inspire kids to pursue their interests starting from where they are, but then continue that pipeline, as sort of Blair mentioned, where you have, there gets to be an age where students, are on the fence about whether to pursue or continue to pursue an interest in. In an ideal world, we would have all of these opportunities to continue to engage them. Beyond that, I would also say that Dan sort of gave a really wonderful personal example of how, for example, Making can also bridge the gap between sort of abstract concepts and principles that students are learning in the classroom, and how those really apply to the real world, and how students can actually identify their own problems or challenges and then develop their own solutions to them. So we're seeing maker spaces popping up in communities and libraries and museums and schools. And those are now spaces where kids have an idea and they're actually able to physically design and prototype a solution or their own product for that matter. We're having young entrepreneurs that are, that have this opportunity because of the fact that we now have access to these resources. And then beyond that, I've always been really passionate about broadening participation and access to making. So, and STEM, I would say overall, I had a very sort of indirect path to the White House, and one organization that I was always really involved in at both an undergrad and graduate school level was the Women in Information Technology student group, and we did a lot of mentorship with local schools. I went to school in Syracuse and did a lot with middle school age young women, and that personally for me has always been a really important part of the work that I'm also doing at the White House.
Good afternoon. So what I'm about to explain is really the work of the students of the district that I work in and the teachers that work with them in Meriden, Connecticut. So we're a school district of 12 elementary schools, roughly about 9,000 students, a little south of Hartford, Connecticut, and just size is all relative, but I would say like a medium size for Connecticut, or on the larger size in Connecticut, actually, urban district. So of our 12 schools, 3 of them in the elementary are extended learning time schools. John Berry is in its second year of implementation. That's when I will speak to most about in science enrichment, especially with partnerships. Roger Sherman's in its first year of implementation, and Casimir Pulaski is our grizzled veteran with 3 years in ELT. Way to go, Pulaski. So we have those 3 schools, and I'll speak to each of them and their partnerships, and really, hopefully, quickly go through some of the other partnerships that exist related to STEM that are not, inclusive of the ELT schools. So at John Berry, this grant started, I believe, last year, and during last year, I switched my role in the district. I've had the honor of really working in Meriden for 15 years, the last 7 of which were the supervisor of mathematics. So now if you put the ampersand science, that is my new title for the district, and I'm very fortunate to work with both disciplines and supervise both disciplines. So there's a partnership through the NOIS, as I hope I'm saying that right, STEM Network, and you have the National Center of Time and Learning and the YMCA and John Berry School, 3 of our teachers all working together to build a science curriculum that's done during the enrichment block. And I'm looking at the principal before speaking with the school in Massachusetts. So in our enrichment block, we've created, and when I say we, I'm taking a lot of credit for all the work of really the teachers that did this. They created a kindergarten to 5 curriculum that occurs during the 90 minutes of enrichment during their day. Now they have a staggered schedule at John Berry, so some of the students are receiving this enrichment activity in the morning, some are receiving in the afternoon by different teachers, and it's a very complicated schedule, so fragile that a house of cards would seem sturdy to it. So I won't, but they've managed to do this incredible work, and it's really because they've had time, thanks to that partnership grant, and thanks to the support of the National Center for Time and Learning, and being able to meet with each other in our school setting, in our district setting, and outside to talk about what that curriculum looks like and what those activities look like. So to kind of connect to what Dan was saying, being fun. So one of the activities, last night as I got nervous before this event occurred, I called our district elementary science facilitator and said, give me something good to say so I don't sound completely ridiculous. Notice I disclaimed that because I will sound somewhat ridiculous. So I gave a little disclaimer there. So she was telling me about one of the activities she has coming up this week with the intermediate grades, where it's talk about inquiry and hands-on. They're really designing skeletal frames of structures that could survive an earthquake. And if you know this elementary facilitator, Mary Jean, I call her Mary Jean the Science Queen, she will have this completely set up where it's very inquiry-based, general questions, and they will test their thinking. There is no right answer. Everything, the feedback's followed back by questions and what do you think, what would you do next? That whole idea that we encounter in the real world, there is no one formula. So that's some of the exciting stuff that's happening at John Berry. It really is truly exciting. At Pulaski, what they're doing for extra science enrichment, they did something creative. So in their other enrichments, they have things that are definitely related to STEM, but what they added a specialist. So in addition to music, gym, and all the traditionals, there is a science special. So the classes rotate through and get an extra dose of science, not part of the core curriculum, but an enriching factor where that teacher who has some experience in the world of science teaching does these extra hands-on activities that enhance our district curriculum. And then Sherman hasn't had the partnership grant that we've experienced with the National Center for Time and Learning, but they have done a similar format of teaching science in the enrichment block, and that has been very successful. And one thing before I forget, and these very complicated notes I have, which is just a bunch of scratchings that I put 5 minutes before this, I do want to make sure I mention our partner that really has made things very successful is the YMCA. So because a lot of their members are actually teachers in other districts, we didn't have that, I don't know you could say anything traditional with extended learning time, but that traditional model of having community partners come in and teach. What they did is they consulted with us in the development of the curriculum and gave us ideas, and they provided resources in terms of STEM nights. We've had a STEM night at Berry 2 years running, where you get families to come in and they run the event with our staff at John Berry. They also do like STEM days. There was field trips out to Mountain Mist, which is like a day camp that the YMCA runs in Meriden. So there was 2 days where they went out and did those activities. So they've been supportive in that way, but also as collaborators. A matter of fact, one of the 3 teachers I mentioned earlier came from that group of STEM teachers and now is on the staff at John Berry working the extended day. So these exciting, maybe non-conventional partnerships that are developing. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned them. And I know there's other stuff going on, but I'll keep it right there for now.
Thank you so much, Neil. I love the example that you just gave to make it real and show some of the actionability behind these partnerships. I'd like to ask that question next. It's like, maybe Blair, if you want to talk a little bit about what partnership looks like, and then I would love to hear other panelists, answer that as well. Like, what is the partnership with a community-based organization or with a school district or with another entity, even across industries? What does that partnership look like? How would you define it as successful?
Sure. Wow. Well, to give you a little bit of background with Cisco, there's probably 3 distinct ways. There's probably more, but let me focus on 3 large categories of how we are engaged and how we're partnering. One of them is around something we call the networking academies. And it's very specific to our industry. We began these academies 20 some odd years ago, started with community colleges, have moved into high schools, Chantilly, we were talking about right down the road. And essentially we are helping students become certified in networking. It's a phenomenal career. You gave us a couple stats, Edie, right? Somewhere between 75 and 90% of all jobs today, right now, require IT and networking skills. And the average CCNA, which is a Cisco Certified Networking Associate, earns something like $80,000 to $110,000 just by being certified. And we have high school students, even some girls, actually getting certified there. So we're partnering with community colleges and high schools, like magnet schools, like Chantilly is an example that I used, as well as others, bringing in Teach for America teachers and getting them engaged and teaching students this whole new avenue of professional development and opportunities for them. I mean, they're literally graduating, being able to go out into the workforce. So that's one partnership.
Shout out because you've got 1 million kids in that academy.
Yes, we do. We've graduated several million, and we have over 1 million right now, and it's global. And I also mentioned earlier that we have more female participation outside the U.S. than we do in the U.S. Go figure. So lots of opportunity. And there's partnerships there. And those partnerships go really deep, and they're extremely complex. And they require funding, they require advocates, they require champions, they require curriculum, but they're 20-plus years old. So we've kind of got that down like an engine. The second avenue or category I would talk about is just financial resources. Similar to Edie's comments earlier at Cisco, because education is such a powerful piece of our culture at the company, every employee is empowered to go and do something good in the field of education, and trying to corral that and bring all the resources. We spend, let's just say, several $100 million in STEM, but it's very fragmented. But we've done a lot of work to try to put our dollars through our Cisco Foundation and through our community relations budget into the right places. And those types of partnerships can be really heavy and very deep, or they can be very light. For example, the Girl Scouts of America came in. We had about 300 girls came into our San Jose office during a leadership offsite, and we did speed mentoring for 90 minutes and introduced our leaders to what it was like to sit across from maybe a 12-year-old girl, which they haven't perhaps done in a while or forgot how to have a dialogue, speed mentor, talk to them about going into STEM, what it looks like to be a STEM professional, and then boom. And that's a pretty light ask and a pretty light request, but it whets the appetites of our employees. So that's financial resources, and it kind of also combines into the third one, which is our volunteering. Volunteerism is a significant piece of Cisco's culture. It's how we define ourselves. We've participated both with STEM Connector and US 2020. We've committed to giving 20% of our employees, which is 7,000 employees here in the US, 20% of their time back into mentoring in the STEM field by 2020. And we're well on our way to exceeding that goal. And we're putting our people into youth organizations. So while the education system is doing amazing things, and I am blown away, there's so many districts who can learn from yours, we also know the education system is sometimes overloaded and can only do so much. So other youth organizations like Girl Scouts, Boys and Girls Club, and many, many others are helping us place our people into their activities with a curriculum to do exactly what Dan is doing. By the way, that is an amazing value proposition to the employee and huge development to the employees, because we've decided if you can manage a group of 12-year-olds, you can manage a group of 45-year-olds, no problem whatsoever. And so those are the types of partnerships that we have, and I guess I would just leave it with some of it is very financial. Sometimes these organizations, they just need our money, and we understand that, and they just need a grant so they can go do the very best work that they are set up to do. Sometimes they need our minds and our energy. And then there are other times where they need a real program, like the Networking Academy. And we are figuring out how we go across all of them, because in each case, they all bring something unique to the market.
Hold on to that microphone real quick, Blair. I have a follow-up question. I would love to ask you touched on this in your comment, the value proposition for a company. Could you dive into that just a little bit more, and what maybe
Sure.
for folks in the audience who are practitioners or who are looking to embark on a partnership with a company, what could they speak to?
Sure,
for that
there's a
value?
huge business value and a business case to be made for getting involved. Obviously, for me, I'm in the technology industry. And so when there's this incredible shortfall in the number of qualified candidates for all these jobs we're creating, it means that my company has to be so much better than every other tech company to get the best talent. It's very, very difficult to do. And then when my customers look like women and look like people of color, and yet my people do not, and I have a problem too. So I've got to have a really strong talent, and so the business case for great talent is significant. And we can't just start in college, because you've lost them. We were talking about that many times, all the way back in middle school. So getting involved at all age levels and driving that business case is key. Also, there's tons of research that just shows a very diverse set of talent, either at the board level, the executive level, or within your organization. So men and women of color, men and women of different incomes and culture, and those women, they get you better profits, higher growth, all the good stuff that companies like Cisco really want to go after. So it's a pretty selfish business case.
Could I actually add something to that as well? So this is a really big priority also for the White House. So you may have heard that we recently hosted or launched an initiative called the Tech Hire Initiative. And this is focused on really addressing that gap of individuals who reflect kind of the diversity of the U.S. and figuring out, how do you actually, at a community and a local level, be able to provide individuals with these opportunities to learn coding, programming, networking, to be able to have that opportunity to make sure that you're training the next generation of the workforce in a way where it meets the needs of local industry, right? So that in terms of a business case proposition, the fact that companies are finding it extremely difficult to find local talent and they're spending significant amounts of money having to recruit someplace that is not local all over the world, essentially, right? And so, I mean, that in and of itself, I think, is a great proposition, and is something that we're really focused on. So we recently hosted the White House's first tech meetup last Friday, and the idea behind that was to bring all of these tech-focused meetup groups and community organizers from all around the country to think about. Here you have a critical mass of individuals with all of this expertise and intellectual capital. How can we actually, match them up with local industry and then figure out how to, to create these opportunities from various educational perspectives, whether K through 12 or higher ed or vocational training or coding boot camps. So that's good.
Thank you, Stephanie. Dan, I'd love to hear from you as well around in the mentor, the volunteer. We talked a little bit about the business case, a little bit about some of the national, federal initiatives that are coming out, but from the voice of the volunteer, what is the why for you?
I get to be the voice of the volunteer today. I love
Not that you're speaking for every volunteer out there, not what I'm not trying to say, but
I
from your perspective.
I think as a volunteer, as a mentor, when I think about partnerships and what they look like, there's a really kind of a cool thing that I'm able to do in that I can bring in other people who don't necessarily have the time or can make a long-term commitment to organizations because they've got other things going on in their lives and so forth. Maybe they don't have the means, but I can ask them to come in and talk to the scholars, right? So they become part of the network and and they get to tell their story about their life, right, and their successes, and that has a lot of meaning. In one case, I asked my wife, actually, she's an oncology nurse for 20 years, and so she came in and talked about why 20 years ago certain forms of cancer were a death sentence and today they aren't, right? And that's because of science and technology and engineering and math and all the research that has gone into curing a disease or at least managing it. So that helps, again, in the scholars at that age to better understand how to take those fundamentals and apply them. I also have a friend who used to play pro football with the Washington Redskins, and I asked him to come in, and the cool thing is he's got a Super Bowl ring, and that's like, everybody loved that. But he said, what should I talk about? How do I relate to these kids? There was about 80 kids in the Alexandria Center that he was speaking to, and I said, talk about anything. Talk about your experiences. And he chose not to talk about the big game, the Super Bowl, the great tackle. He chose to talk about failure and why failure is actually good and why failure is something you learn from and why probably any famous person you've ever known in history who has come up with some great technology or cool idea failed about 1,000 times before that happened, and to provide that perspective. So I think those kind of people, I have the fortune as a volunteer, as a mentor, to be able to bring them in and talk about those experiences and enrich the entire process.
Thank you, Dan. So we have a few moments for questions and answer if there are folks in the audience who have some questions for our esteemed panelists.
I'm Lindsay Wood-Jeffries with Higher Achievement. Thank you, Dan, for being a mentor. Blair, I was really taken with your comments around Cisco's role and the amazing leadership you've shown. And I want to know how we get more companies involved. I know everyone at STEM Connector and Million Women Mentors it's enormous, the corporate engagement. One question I didn't get to ask on the plenary after lunch was, what about the corporate sector? We spend so much time slicing and dicing every public funding source we can to get $500 per student when we know it costs so much more. And what do you think would be the lever for a bigger sea change?
Sure. Well, every company is different. And, what I've experienced at Cisco, I believe is unique. It is unique. You just made my point because the culture, it started at the very top. It's just who we are. We give back. We're very focused on volunteers. And we are by no means not competitive because we like to win. So if you don't have a culture who's just doing amazing things for the amazing thing, there is such a business case around it. This week in our Research Triangle Park site, we're doing a whole STEM Mentor Week. And we have 3,000 girls coming in all week long to be mentored by 1,000 Cisco employees. And the business case is significant. One, what Stephanie said, right? These are girls that we hope to hire. It's a lot cheaper. So that you could put a million numbers just around the talent and the potential talent that you could bring by being active in the community and building your brand as a company. Because trust me, it's very difficult for Cisco to compete against Facebook or Google in Silicon Valley. There's a cool company, and there's the 30-year-old company. And I'm at the 30-year-old company, which is old and not cool. Not as grizzled, but still. So there's a branding and a talent business case that needs to be made. And in some companies, that's the most important thing they're going after. In other companies, they need a retention of their current employees. And let's face it, we need to have outlets as employees that can benefit the company but also help us pursue our passions, and you become much more engaged. We're exploring how do we get volunteer time off, not just paid time off, where we start rewarding our employees with actual days of volunteerism, and it's not their PTO, and so we're looking at that, and we're trying to get that through. So I guess I'm giving you examples. I think the needs to be leading at the top, so we need a couple of really strong leaders, of which I do think we have. Certainly Cisco has one, but there's others. The business case needs to be there. For us, it's about a talent need, and so we've just gone hog wild in my organization. I'm putting all the metrics around that. I mean, we even know how much volunteerism happens by function. So for my function, right, if I have a shortage of talent, but my talent's not out there volunteering, I can do something. Our engineering organization, their volunteer hours are really low. Well, we should make our engineers get out there so that they can help bring in the new talent. So I think the business case is important. And then I would just say something, Oscar, you and I talked about, is the ask. We need to figure out how to start with light asks. A lot of organizations do come to us with really big asks, and perhaps they're not aligned to our business outcomes or our business goals. So if organizations want to start with some lighter asks to whet the appetite of the companies, and then you start aligning it with the company's goals, that helps, just like we have a responsibility on our end to do something for the community. But I'd be happy to help because I'm passionate and we're passionate, and I think it is a competitive advantage for our country if we get this right over time.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
So on the flip side of that, from the district or school perspective, when you said light ask, you should look for the opportunities, maybe not, there may not be a Cisco in your neighborhood, but there's still other corporations. Like, one, know what your purpose of the vision of your district or school or initiative is, and see if there's something right there in front of you that you could ask for. For example, something that's not part of Extended Day, but our district has been doing, they received a Nellie Mae grant, and they're big there. I'm part of there. We are big into changing our culture towards student-centered learning and personalized learning and blended learning. So a great example of that is we have these experiences called personalized learning experiences, PLEs. There's a student who is interested in the construction taking place at our high school. We're doing a massive renovation at both of our high schools. His personalized learning experience was going on site as the building was being constructed. Talk about real world and exciting and fun, and partnered up with a company, the Gilbane company, that was actually working on the building. So there's one example. Didn't have to go that far to ask, and it wasn't a heavy ask in that situation. So there's one example. And another example is integrating. So we got a grant that wasn't, exponentially high, but basically we have a wind turbine where the experiment is a math class, a science class, and another science class all working together to integrate and talk about all the different ways that we could power cell phone chargers for our students. We have this thing called Positive Behavior Support Systems. So they have this PBIS room. So how can you support that? Well, these 3 classes are working on all this incredible thing to have this wind turbine on the top of the building power something. Again, I think that's really cool that they're doing that. And it's from this small, like, light ask, but looking for what your purpose is can help you.
Great, thank you for that, Neil. We have time for one more question.
Hi, David Leibowitz, principal at the Brown School. So what makes for a good STEM partner for us is clearly someone who shares the long-term vision we have for our kids to become science and technology professionals. But we also operate in a land of accountability where we need an organization that shares our goal of seeing growth in students' mastery of state standards in science, technology, and engineering. So that's what makes for a good partner for us. But I'm curious, kind of from your perspective, what can a school do to be a good partner for an external organization?
Okay, it becomes quite localized, right? I mean, there's Cisco the Borg in San Jose, that's 70,000 employees, and we would be hard-pressed to point to 1 or 2 metrics. It really depends on the needs of the community in which we operate. We are in places like Research Triangle Park that has a unique set of needs for their students. And so for our employees to be engaged, which they're incredibly engaged, in fact, they lead the way, they need to feel it, right, in their community, whether it's their own children or if it's a part of the community that needs that help. So I think the dialogue at a local level is probably the most important, to be very specific. I know what I want to do as a leader at Cisco. I want to attract the best talent to Research Triangle Park. So how does that coincide with what the district needs? And how do we come up with a set of KPIs or perhaps even a set of goals that are unique but yet intersect? And we've done that. We've done that before. We do that in Austin. We do that in Boxborough in Massachusetts. But I wish it was an easier way. I think when you partner, you set up and articulate very expressly what your goals are and what success looks like at the end of it. And for a company like Cisco, knowing our goals are around talent and around growth and around sustainability, making sure those goals connect. Feels like kind of a vanilla answer, but it's a local level because a company the size of Cisco is going to have multiple needs, just like every district that we engage with is going to have multiple needs. A champion, by the way, in that company goes a really long way, right? Because that will be someone who carries it. And I can guarantee almost every example of our partnerships, there's a champion at Cisco and a champion on the reciprocal side, and it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I would comment through the work of US 2020, what we've seen. So also to go back to the question that was asked earlier around, where are all the companies in this work? US 2020, we are so in awe of Cisco and their commitment and their dedication to this. But we know that not every company is like Cisco, or not every company is at the place that Cisco is. Right, exactly. There are great companies who are doing incredible work. And for us, what we've found is it takes time, it takes trust, and it takes those shared goals, being transparent and articulate on the education partner side and matching that with the company and what their goals are. And sometimes you may go to a company and you may find out in conversation, this is not the right company or this is not the right partnership, and need to be okay with walking away from that, or need to be okay with meeting them where they are at and talking about some of those light asks or light lifts or light touches for their employees and get them engaged in what we call on-ramp opportunities. So those one-time volunteer opportunities or those light touches where kids are coming to the office versus making the ask of the employees going to where the students are. I want to wrap, because we will need to transition to the rest of our day, with some things that I heard from all of the panelists. Again, that time and trust and transparency, shared goals are a key to creating lasting partnerships and sustainable partnerships. Also making it real. I thought that was such a great commentary in the beginning of our conversation. Making it real for students, applicable for students, the visioning. We say at US 2020, you can't be what you don't see. So for students, they need to be able to have that connection with a real live industry professional in order to envision for themselves what it might be for them to become one. So we applaud Dan and the panelists and all of the work that you're doing in that. And also want to make a call to action for everyone here in the room. Like, you're here at this summit and you're here in this conversation, and thinking about how you might be able to either personally volunteer and personally mentor within your local communities, or get connected with an organization like Higher Achievement or Citizen Schools that does. And I thank you all for your time and for joining us for today's panel.